is great this season, Blake, because even though we had high hopes, I can't imagine that you had them at a 9-game win streak if I told you that guys like Dennis Jenkins, Javonte Green, and others were going to be in the starting lineup and be key contributors to this team here.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I mean, you see the injury reports night in and night out, and you're just like, okay, tonight's the night that the streak ends. It was nice while it lasted, and somehow these guys keep finding ways to win. I mean, they're playing right now as we talk, and they're playing a pretty bad Indiana team, so hopefully the win streak can continue. But yeah, I mean, 11-2, the top of the Eastern Conference. Who could have thought that would have happened?
I actually really like this lineup that they have because I'm big on the Pistons. I cover them often. I watch the games. I watch the Summer League games. I watch the preseason games. I watch pretty much every game that they have. I watch a lot of G League games. So I'm familiar with the back end of this roster more than most, not you, but more than most. And so the idea that guys like Dennis Jenkins are getting significant minutes, and some of the others, Smith has been thrown in there, but other guys from the G League team, some of these back end guys on their roster, it shows the depth of the roster, which is very important as the season wears on. And there's part of me, because obviously they're winning, so that there's nothing to really counterbalance, hey, you're winning with this lineup. But the fact that they're able to rest all of these guys and see what these backups are able to do, that's going to be great for the minute count for the starters, because even though they're a young team, as a Pistons fan, I always think of that Flip Saunders era of the Pistons, where he won like 60 games in the regular season, but he was burning those guys out, and they were mostly veterans at that point, and they did great during the regular season, but they didn't really make it to the playoffs, and that's tough. You're working on games 83 and above, and then plus the preseason, so you're basically into the 90s at that point when you start the playoffs. And especially for veteran players, it's tough. But if you can get these guys, get their minute count down during the actual game, 30 minutes versus 40 minutes, because before these injuries, these minute counts were creeping up. They had a couple overtime games. Cade was doing 40 minutes in some of those games, and that's going to take a toll even on a young guy. So I like that they're resting, and we're seeing like, hey, we've got a competent small forward fill-in Javonte Green that's able to give some hustle minutes. Dennis Jenkins may be answering some of the questions of, well, hey, we need a backup ball handler. Well, apparently they have a backup ball handler on the team.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, and what you mentioned about Flip Saunders, I mean, it's kind of similar to what we've seen in recent years with the Tom Thibodeau Knicks teams. And, I mean, he's not there anymore, but you saw they obviously beat the Pistons in the playoffs last year, but they're one of those teams that is trying to take the next step, and maybe that plays a part into it. So, obviously, I mean, I don't know anything, but personally, I think that Cade was probably ready to return to the lineup tonight against Indiana, but being the fact that it is a 1-12 basketball team and there's some better teams coming up, maybe they just gave them one more night here. And yeah, I think it's important to be able to find ways to win games when you're missing your top guys. I mean, with how Cade came out of the gate this year, I thought if they don't have him in the lineup, it's really going to be tough to win because everything was going through him. And I mean, Jalen Duren's been incredible too, but a lot of that has been funneled through Cade and created by Cade. But Duren, when he's been out there without Cade, even tonight, he's found ways to still do what he does. And Dennis Jenkins, like you mentioned, has answered a lot of questions. So they're just, I mean, I know it's cliche, but they're just a gritty group, and I really wouldn't have thought that they would be competing in games when they had a starting lineup of Wendell Moore Jr. and Dennis Jenkins and Javonte Green's getting a ton of minutes. So, yeah, all credit to these guys and credit to the front office, too, for making some of those impactful signings, like getting Javonte Green on a cheap deal pretty close to the regular season starting.
The fact that guy is essentially like your 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th guy on this team is amazing because he really has given them good quality minutes. You could gripe about maybe the shooting percentage or what have you, but a guy in that position, I was talking about this earlier today because I've talked with people that maybe haven't been as happy with his play, but I look at him as like a Kindle Vildor for the Lions. He was a very polarizing player for the Lions. Cornerback, started as like the 5th or 6th cornerback, and then by the end of the season, he ended up being basically their number 2 cornerback 2 seasons in a row. This is kind of how I look at Javonte Green. He's a great backup, and in brief duty, he can kind of fill in and do some of these hustle things. And I feel like this is a very important and underrated role in the NBA too. We're not seeing it as a need as much for the Pistons, but I think it will be one because Thompson kind of fills this role as a young guy, the defensive stalwart that is able to basically make a big impact without touching the ball a whole lot. He doesn't necessarily have to deal with the ball much to make a big impact on the game, but that small forward wing player that you can put on the opposing team's best player and is flexible to guard 1 through 5 or pretty close to that is very important. But a lot of times that guy, sometimes it's a Thompson or somebody that's a little bit more high profile and is a big prospect. And sometimes it's Derek Jones or Javonte Green. Like they come in different iterations, but you need multiple guys like that on your team that don't want the ball, don't really expect the ball. They just expect to get out there, hustle, and make the game tough for the opposing team, because with basketball, this is more true than really any other game. There's only one ball. Only one person can be touching the ball at the same time. So if you've got guys out there that don't necessarily aren't ball dominant and don't need it, that's an advantage, especially when you got a guy like Cade that wants to spread it all around.
Yeah. And what you mentioned about those players, like coming from a whole different types of iterations, like that position really are the type of players that get paid those massive contracts in the NBA. They're always at the top of every draft board because they're hard to get. And once the team gets one, they commit to them for a long time and pay them a lot of money. And Javonte Green obviously isn't necessarily a high-level wing player, but he's certainly been impactful on the rotation, and especially for the short-term deal at the price tag that the Pistons got him. Like when they made that signing, I figured it was the last man on the roster, like a depth piece, but he was involved in the rotation pretty immediately, even if it was on short minutes. And then with all these injury woes, especially with his position, Tobias Harris missing some time, he's been great. And like you said, he's not a high maintenance player by any means. So that's been one of the wins of this win streak, alongside I think the other clear one is Dennis Jenkins as well.
That's what I was going to ask you, is who else has stuck out to you, because I think there's a lot of candidates. I'm looking at the box score right now, and they're playing great, by the way, during our interview. So we got to keep this up. Good thing we got another segment here with Blake. But I mean, Duren, obviously this will be. I was thinking about this when we were talking about the different lineups. They're going to be one of these teams that by the end of the season, they're going to have the number of iterations that they will have tried in 82 games is going to be enormous because of as far as starting lineups go because of how many injuries they've had. But now this is another different one, and I think I didn't see what the starting lineup was, but I assume by who's played that they went with the double big in Stewart and Duren, and then paired Jenkins, I would assume Robinson, and then did Green start at small forward or what? Or did Moore?
Ron Holland started, but he it looks like he went out early. So I'm not sure what really happened there. I turned on the game like midway through the first quarter, so Javonte Green has got on a lot of a lot of those minutes. So Ron is he's still in. I apologize.
I think he just got put back in.
Changing the box scores is really messing with us all.
Yeah, I think he just got put back in. So I think you were. It looked like that's why I wasn't sure if he had started, because it doesn't look like he was out there very very long. But he must have had that part of the rotation and then gotten back in here. But yeah, this is. You don't have Cade to dish the ball to Stewart and Duren, but it looks like Duren's getting his own. I mean, he's 6 of 7, and he's being just as dominant. His emergence during this season, because this is a key season for him and the team. Obviously, they decided not to re-sign him yet, and he's proving that he's one of the important pieces of their future, especially given the fact that I feel like we talk about this with Dan Campbell a lot, but it happens with a lot of people in sports, how you make him one thing. I feel like because he's a big guy and because he's muscular and he's got that huge frame, people say, oh, well, he's a rebounder, back to the basket scorer, he's down low, but he's got a better handle than you think. He's a better passer than you think. And it seems like that shooting touch is getting better because you're seeing it at the line so far this year.
Yeah, and that's been a big improvement, and he's got to the line a ton, and he actually made a mid-range jumper in the game against Indiana tonight. So, I mean, he obviously has a lot more opportunity out there right now, where the offense is with Cade out. It's like, okay, whoever's going, continue to go. But I mean, the way Duren's played so far this season, it's really like, if he keeps it up, he should be in the All-Star game as a reserve. We'll see if that happens, but just everything he does offensively, I mean, I still think he has a little ways to go as a defender, but he's looked better there too. But yeah, I don't think, like, it was a question maybe on the future for him in terms of the extension before this year, but I think the front office is getting some answers pretty quickly.
It's funny because heading into the season, I would say I was slightly more confident about Ivy given his development before the injury last year than Duren, as long as he came back healthy. Then he had the issue with the knee surgery and everything. I know he's gotten active, so we'll see what happens there, but I'm curious what those contracts are going to look like for both of them. Obviously, Duren is playing his way into a big contract, but this is part of the strategy with these young cores, is making sure to get these draft picks right and then building around the young cores. So we'll talk about that and how we see the future here with the top team in the East at the time here. So come back with us with Blake Silverman of SI and Pistons Pin Down. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Blake Silverman, talking some Pistons. Blake, I try not to overreact either way when teams are losing or when they're winning, but at the beginning of the season, the East was wide open, and there was a lot made of different moves that were made by other teams in the East, because obviously you have Indiana, who, as you referenced, is one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference, mainly because of the injury toll that they've had, especially to Halliburton. And then you've got Boston dealing with kind of clearing house a little bit, and then the injury to Tatum. So a couple of the powers had been taken out, and so now you're left with, okay, well, Cleveland's still pretty strong, and then Orlando made moves, so people were high on them. And I did think, not just because we're in the market, but I did think that Detroit was kind of overlooked because they didn't make the splashy move. But I was one of the few people, I think, coming out kind of against the Kevin Durant trade for the Rockets at the beginning of the season. This was one of the things that I wanted to watch because the teams are kind of similar. They built young cores. They have a good coach that's establishing culture there and working well with this young core. They both have a Thompson twin for that matter, and in the young cores. But they've gone different directions now. The Rockets have officially taken their swing. They got rid of part of their young core to then bring in an unquestioned first ballot Hall of Famer, but one that is aging, and I don't know how well he fits on that team. We'll see as the season goes on. We'll see what happens, but I like the Pistons strategy better. I think it's more sustainable, but I'm curious what you thought kind of at the beginning of the season, where you thought they would they would be, and obviously compared to where they are now, because they're on top of the East with a team that's not even near complete, and they're still atop the East and they're still dominating. So that has to buoy your spirits for the season here.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I agree that I did think the East was wide open with everything that happened to Boston and the Halliburton injury. But even with that being the case, like, I thought there was room for the Pistons to be in a similar spot to what they were last year. But I don't know, like, they won 3 times as many games as they won the season before. That it's not possible for that to happen again, obviously. But when you do that, I think it's sort of difficult to take that next step. But in the East, we've seen not random teams, but teams just make a run in the playoffs seemingly out of nowhere. Like, I remember what Trae Young in Atlanta did a few years ago. So I was not expecting the Pistons to make a big trade and really go for it this year, which they didn't. I mean, the good news is if you are looking for them to make that type of deal, they're still in prime position to do it with all their draft picks they own and some interesting young players if they want to deal any of them. But yeah, overall, I think with this 11-2 start, the sky's the limit. I don't want to overreact either, but in a wide open Eastern Conference, I mean, anything can happen. And I would not be surprised, honestly, if the Pistons made a run similar to that Hawks run of a few years ago to the Eastern Conference Finals or something like that, or at least winning a playoff series, I think would be a huge win for this franchise.
That's really the next step, because like you said, they faced the Knicks last year. They were close. They didn't have Stewart. They were very close to winning that series, but now the next step would be to win a series. But man, depending on how this breaks out, it's not illogical to think that they could go farther than that, especially because, I mean, it has to be emphasized how far away from complete this team is right now. They've had all the injuries. Ivy and Thompson still have not played together. Now they're without both of them. They haven't played together healthy the last 2 years, and now they're without both of them and Cade and everybody else. And like you said, Cade's injury is probably just more, okay, let's make sure to get him as much rest as we can. We think we can get this one against the Pacers. We got a tough stretch coming up. But when you look at the other teams here, there's not a lot of teams in the East where they feel like big threats. I think Cleveland is one of them, and that seems like a very natural rivalry. It's Bickerstaff's former team. It's a double big lineup that could brawl a little bit with the Duren and Stewart kind of lineup, and it does match up pretty well. Donovan Mitchell will be tough to contain in that series. They don't have Garland back, so that's something where once he gets back in full form, then they could look even better. But we'll see how that would be a fun one to see for the Eastern Conference Final. I think is if you could get there, have the Pistons and the Cavs in the Eastern Conference Final. That would be a very interesting storyline, especially with the coaches matching up there.
Yeah, and I mean, we're sort of going back to the 90s a little bit with the Pistons making this step and Cleveland being there and the Knicks being there too. And I mean, Indiana, obviously a down year, but it's right in the same. And I mean, there are some other, like the Hawks are off to a good start and they had a ton of changes in the off season. So they're another team to look out for. And I mean, obviously the Bucks with Giannis as well. You can't count them out, and they might try to make things happen. But yeah, the Pistons and the Cavs, and I mean, it would be a great storyline for JB Bickerstaff to coach against his old team and in a playoff series wherever it is. And I mean, obviously he deserves a ton of credit for the job that he's done there. And I think it's been huge for some of these younger players. Like I think Duren and Ivy, this is the first time they went into a new season with the same coach. So that continuity and everything, I think is huge. And we know all the changes that went down in the front office as well. But yeah, it's really anyone's conference. I mean, I do think that the Knicks and the Cavs are the toughest teams to draw and play a 7-game series with, but anything could happen.
I kind of look at the Knicks. You were right to bring them up as the modern day example of what we were talking about with the Flip Saunders era, kind of overplaying them. I know Thibodeau's not there anymore, but those guys are veterans and they have a lot of minutes on them, and they don't necessarily have an exceptionally deep bench. So I think by the time they hit the playoffs, I could see the wheels falling off for them a little bit, but we'll have to see. That you're right about that lineup. It's a great lineup, and it's very tough with the switchability, the defense, the versatility, the multiple stars. They have a lot of things going for them, but there's a point where that catches up to people. We've seen it with different teams that make deep playoff runs or have a lot of minutes on them. So we'll have to see, but it's fun to have this version of the Pistons because it's a new thing every night, and it's fun every night because they're successful with these lineups. The reinforcements are coming, but I'm curious to understand what you think is going to be kind of a key going forward. Obviously, it's going to be hard to improve on an 11-2 record, but obviously there's some continuity that has to be established because as good as they played, a lot of these guys haven't played together. So that's going to be one of the things that they're going to have to work out is some guys have had increased roles and now they're going to have to decrease their role again for the guy that was ahead of them in the depth chart to come back. And so then you're going to have to operate with those decreased roles, but that doesn't seem like an issue with this current culture that JB and Trajan Langdon have established.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think in terms of moving forward, obviously we're waiting for Cade Cunningham's return. I think it really starts and stops with him. So first and foremost, but another thing I think is just the shooting aspect, like we've seen in prior years and the Troy Weaver years, how just not being able to make any shots was a huge problem and really hindered the rest of the offense. And Trajan Langdon, the new front office, definitely addresses that right out of the gate when they bring in Malik Beasley last year and they signed Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert this year. And I'm not confident Asar Thompson's ever going to develop as a shooter, but Ron Holland seems to be getting a bit better. But that three-point shooting when they lost opening night against Chicago in the first few games, like that was really what you could look at is where they were lacking. So I don't know if it's as simple as making a deal for another shooter, because I think in the long term, when you have Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson as big pieces of your core, like neither of them are going to be three-point shooters. So how do you address that? I mean, I think they've done an incredible job of it so far with Javonte Green and Dennis Jenkins providing those, and Ron Holland improving, and Duncan Robinson playing really well over this winning streak. But that would be the one thing that I would keep an eye on moving forward, because defensively, I mean, they've honestly been awesome, which is a credit to the whole group.
Well, that was one of the things that I was curious about with the whole, because we're going to try to cover this later on the show in maybe a few weeks, hopefully. But obviously the gambling has been a big talk, and then Chauncey Billups got involved in that because of his involvement in things over there in Portland. But Beasley was the start to that. But when the news all hit, because of the way things are and news hitting so fast and these reporters getting on things quickly, we can jump to conclusions. And what I tried to remind people with the gambling thing is, hey, remember we did this with Malik Beasley, and then a bunch of news came out that, he was spending his money inappropriately, and he really looked guilty, until they decided, we can't really find anything more. And I think maybe he's got a little time till he's officially cleared, but he's headed there, it seems, and he could be available. So I always wondered it seems like if he came back if he came back to the NBA, one, it seems like the door would be open in Detroit as long as he was cleared, and two, there's still a fit for him even though they have Robinson, because then that basically means that Robinson kind of replaces Tim Hardaway in a way and improves that shooting, and then you still get Malik Beasley, who by all evidence that I read and saw, was a great culture fit. Obviously had a great season, but he's a guy that I would think would be welcomed back into this locker room.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think there's obviously a lot going on behind the scenes there that we don't know about. And I think the Pistons actually did make a move to fill their final roster spot, but those signings are like non-guaranteed deals. So if you wanted to bring in Malik Beasley, you could easily maneuver your way into it. I mean, I don't know what the Pistons think. I think everything Malik Beasley has posted on social media is if and when he makes a return to the NBA, he wants it to be in Detroit. Who knows if that's reciprocated? I mean, I know at least on the floor last year and in the locker room how big he was for everything this team did. So I think the door would be open if everything was okay, but I could also see the team just being like, we don't want to deal with this, because that's a big one, obviously.
Oh yeah, I mean that would be the ideal move for them in a lot of ways, because they have followed the same script as a lot of the Detroit teams. You talked about grit, and that word gets thrown around a lot in Detroit, but there's a reason. We talked about this last week a little bit, how kind of the city emulates the fans, the team emulates the fans, and vice versa, and it kind of goes around in a circle. And there's a reason that these teams end up being gritty, because they're a counterpart to the fans in the city. But a lot of them have followed the same track, which is young core, layer in some cheaper veterans that are culture fits, and then try to improve that and focus on that culture and the next man up and get that core elevated. That's what the Pistons have done. That young core is looking good early on, but you've got a guy that potentially could come off the street, and he's a culture fit because he's already been in your locker room.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that's the easy part of it. Obviously, you need to find where those minutes are going to come from. I mean, I think if he's on this roster, then you're going to find minutes for him. Like, he would have led the league in 3-pointers last year if Anthony Edwards didn't take like 20 of them in his last game of the regular season. So you find room for that. I think just everything outside of basketball is really what ties this one up. So I'm not holding my breath per se, but if and when he is able to come back, I think it definitely could be with this group. And I think he would certainly be all bought in. And if we do see a signing and he rejoins, like, you have to know that the team clearly wanted him back too, because of everything he did last year.
Being in a position to not be sure where the minutes would come from for Malik Beasley with the amount of injuries is amazing. You're absolutely right about the point, but but I think that's a great point to kind of end on, because it's like, hey, this is where we're at. You're right that they would find minutes for him, but they've improved the roster and elevated things even without him. So if he did come, he would probably be a fit, and they would find minutes for him. But yeah, they're in great shape without him. So we'll have to see how that goes. But we appreciate you joining the show. We appreciate you giving us your insights. We'll look forward to having you back on as the season progresses, but make sure people can figure out where to follow you here, both on the Pistons side of things and the SI side of things.
Yeah. Follow me on any social at Blake Silverman, and you can find my written work on SI.com, doing a bunch of stuff, not limited to just the Pistons or even basketball. So yeah, feel free to check it out, and thanks for having me on again. Really enjoyed it.